I'm Chris Moy from Stantec. I'm a Director of Catchments and Nature-Based Solutions, which includes inland and coastal water quality as well. So I'll be chairing today's session. We're going to take you on a little bit of a natural capital journey, really. We've got a terrific lineup of speakers. We've got Dr. Joel Atherton, who's principal in the environment team at OFWAT. So Joel led OFWAT's work on WINEP, which I'm sure we all know, but Water Industry National Environment Programme. He also leads OFWAT's approach to natural capital in the English and Welsh water sectors and the role that it will play in PR24. He has a PhD in environmental economics and has worked for a number of environmental and consumer organisations. So welcome, Joel. We then have Eleanor Smith from the Environment Agency. So Eleanor is a senior advisor on price review. Eleanor's worked at the Environment Agency since January 1998, which is 24 years. So that's a long time, but not as long as me. So you're still okay there. She is a senior advisor on the price review in the Environment Agency's integrating water planning and programming team within the Environment and Business Directorate. Before that, she led the Environment Agency's input to the Environmental Audit Committee's inquiry into water quality in rivers. And during her career, she has worked on a number of price reviews at both a national level and local level in Cumbria and Lancashire concerning the delivery of environmental outcomes. Then we have Dr. Nalika Rajapaksha, who's Integrated Catchment Strategy Manager at United Utilities. Nalika drives wastewater catchment strategy to improve Northwest River quality. She steers the nature-based solutions within United Utilities and is responsible for development and delivery of innovative catchment interventions through a partnership approach. Previously, Nalika worked for United Utilities Bioresources Services for about 5 years. Before joining United Utilities, Nalika worked as Research Associate for Forest Research UK and University of Central Lancashire, where she earned her PhD in Environmental Management. So Nalika's presentation will be jointly presented by Rebecca. So if you can give us a wave, Rebecca, so we know who you are. So we have Rebecca Speed, who's a natural capital analyst at United Utilities. Rebecca is responsible for developing a best practice approach to natural capital assessment within United Utilities, driving consistency and confidence in the natural capital numbers that support her business plans. She's also responsible for United Utilities' corporate natural capital account, which was first developed to understand the value of natural assets and the benefits they provide. So Rebecca has a background in environmental sciences and completed a master's degree in conservation biology at the University of Liverpool. And then our final speaker for the final paper is Dr. Bruce Horton, who's a principal sustainability consultant at Stantec. So Bruce is an environmental and resource economist with over 15 years experience of applying economic concepts to practical environmental management and sustainability at national, European and international level, predominantly in the water sector. So Bruce leads Stantec's work on environmental economics and natural capital, and he has extensive experience in natural and social capital accounting. So Joel and Eleanor, I will leave it to you for your presentation.
So hello, welcome everybody and good morning. As Chris said, I'm Eleanor Smith from the Environment Agency, and helping with the slides today is Joel Atherton from OFWAT. So on this call, we're going to cover natural capital, why we should use a natural capital approach, what we've developed for PR24. We're also going to cover the WINEP options development guidance, learning for the future, and the WINEP timeline. I'd just like to say I'm doing this presentation on behalf of Catherine Moore, who isn't able to be here. So she's helped put some of these slides together. So bear with me as I'm going to refer to some notes so I don't say the wrong thing on behalf of Catherine. So hopefully that's okay. So natural capital is a human-centered concept that seeks to understand what nature does for us. So it's the air that we breathe, it's the water we drink, it's where we get our food from. It's the green spaces we enjoy, and all of these sustain our livelihoods and well-being and underpin our economy. So on the slide is the Environment Agency's logic chain, which shows the pathway from natural assets through to value. So we've got our natural assets such as rivers, land and species. They deliver ecosystem services such as fresh water, providing benefits that we value, such as drinking water. The diagram shows how pressures and drivers of environmental change, management interventions and other capital inputs affect the flow of these services and the benefits that we receive. For example, how our woodlands and peatlands regulate flows of water to protect downstream communities from floods and store carbon to help regulate the global climate, and that their ability to do so is subject to pressures, management changes and other capital inputs. It's also important to note that the quantity, condition and location of natural assets are all important factors in determining the benefits to people and their value. So a natural capital approach is a framework to ensure the benefits and value provided by natural assets are accounted for in our decision making. So there's been a temptation to think of value provided by natural assets as something that we can enjoy for free, but like any asset, that's not true. So we need to invest in the maintenance, protection and enhancement of these natural assets to secure the benefits they provide, so that the water industry can deliver its services and our wider economy and society can thrive. A natural capital approach promotes the management of ecosystems in a joined up way, and it delivers for people by focusing on what we value. It doesn't supersede regulatory requirements, such as the need to protect designated sites, but it does help to make visible the wider value of protecting non-designated sites. So why use a natural capital approach? The water industry depends on natural assets to provide reliable, clean and affordable water services to customers and as a sink for discharges. The water industry is also directly dependent on natural capital assets to deliver other key objectives such as biodiversity protection and enhancement, climate adaptation and resilience, achieving net zero targets and contributing to flood protection. So natural capital doesn't only contribute to the delivery of core services to customers, it's also investing in natural capital, which is vital to ensure those services are resilient to those drivers of change. We're also in the middle of a global climate emergency and ecological crisis, so there's never been a more important time to reverse the decline in biodiversity and mitigate and adapt to climate change. Putting natural capital at the heart of our decision making is essential if we are to achieve this. So by accounting for those benefits and value delivered by natural capital, we can make better decisions that avoid degrading our natural assets and pose unnecessary risks to the water industry, our economy and our well-being. We can use a natural capital approach to help make the business case for investing in natural assets. We can use the approach to identify actions that deliver wider benefits, including environmental net gain. Quantifying and making visible those wider benefits to beneficiaries can in turn help unlock new funding or co-funding opportunities, including different programmes within the same water company, as well as wider stakeholders or in a particular location. Moving towards customer and investor expectations, it's fair to say both are increasingly focused on issues such as environmental protection and social value, with a growing demand from investors to understand the connection between sustainability and financial risks and opportunities. Taking a natural capital approach can ensure those decisions are better aligned with these concerns. In the wider policy context, the 25-year Environment Plan commits the government, and by extension the water industry, to grow our natural capital and use the approach in decision making. This is a key part of the water industry strategic environmental requirements, which we may also know as WISER, which provides a commitment from the government to work with the industry to enhance natural capital. So just wanted to cover the water industry webinar that Catherine and colleagues ran back in March. So there was a series of engagement webinars run by the Environment Agency, which focused on natural capital for the water industry. Some of you on this call may have attended those. The topics covered on those calls are listed on the slides. If not, and you would like to know more about natural capital and the natural capital approach in the context of the water industry, we're encouraging you to listen to the webinar online. It's a pre-recorded session made specifically for those who want to listen to an uninterrupted version. There's also an accompanying Q&A question and answer document too. Water industry colleagues can access that recording via the Environment Agency's Price Review SharePoint site. Otherwise, if you don't have access to that, I'll put in the chat an email address you can email to ask for a copy of that presentation. So, natural capital approach for PR24. So taking a natural capital approach for the 2024 price review, as outlined in WISER, is a new way of working. It's one that will start to transform how we invest to protect and enhance the natural assets that the water industry relies upon to deliver high quality services. It will offer significant opportunities to co-develop better solutions that provide multiple benefits to a variety of beneficiaries and can help identify co-funding opportunities. DEFRA and the Environment Agency and OFWAT are promoting a best value planning approach for PR24 to support the development of WINEP options that deliver wider value and outcomes for people and the environment. We're continuing to work on 3 areas that support the water industry and practitioners to take a natural capital approach. These are promoting common outcome metrics to enable the assessment and measurement of natural capital and environmental net gain in a consistent way. We're developing accessible tools to increase confidence and uptake of approaches to deliver wider benefits and encourage innovation from others. For example, our natural capital register and account tool. We're providing guidance to provide clarity to those the Environment Agency advises and regulates, for example, the water resource planning guidelines and supplementary guidance, which support water companies to use a natural capital approach for long-term water resource planning. And also the new WINEP options development guidance, which embeds a natural capital approach to help identify best value options for PR24. So let's talk about this WINEP options development guidance. So the guidance has 6 principles within it, which we want to be followed for PR24 to develop the options, one of which is taking a natural capital approach. The other principles are delivering environmental net gain, collaboration, evidence, proportionality, and catchment and nature-based solutions. Those principles are intrinsically linked and should not be considered in isolation. For example, a key aspect of taking a natural capital approach is collaboration. Taking such an approach to facilitate the options development will support water companies deliver more for people and for the environment by ensuring a focus on natural assets, so the actions at site scale or landscape scale that mean natural assets are bigger, better, and more joined up, meaning we will start to see real benefits to people and wildlife. It will also help ensure nature is more fully accounted for in decision making, delivering actions for people by focusing on what they value. And it will also help you measurably deliver environmental net gain and wider environmental outcomes. So through the options development, water companies need to aim to understand the quantity, the quality and the location of natural assets in order to consider the impacts on and potential changes to them from the different WINEP options. This will help gain a comprehensive understanding of what might change and how that might impact on ecosystem services and benefits that those natural assets provide now and in the future. We recommend that you use natural asset metrics, both quantitative and qualitative, to understand your changes to natural asset quantity and condition as a first step, supplementing this evidence with valuation of ecosystem services and goods. The WINEP wider environmental outcome metrics spreadsheets, which is available on our PR24 SharePoint site, signposts and recommends a suite of metrics and relevant evidence that you can use in your WINEP options development. You should use those metrics to measure the change in biodiversity, the extent and condition of natural assets, as well as monetary metrics to value changes in ecosystems and services, ecosystem services from the different options. The natural capital approach is centred around co-design, co-delivery and common outcomes, but we can only achieve this by working together and adopting a natural capital approach, which is a framework that pulls everybody together. Water companies should work in collaboration with others to develop their WINEP options. In the context of natural capital and the environmental net gain principles, this means focusing on natural assets and the services they provide, so more natural assets in a better condition and more joined up to ensure they continue to deliver benefits for the people. So, learning for the future. So we know that the inclusion of natural capital in WINEP options development guidance marks a really important change in the approach for water companies. It's based on current best practice, and we recognise that this will evolve in the future, including, for example, the metrics that we recommend and signpost. But through this learning and continuous improvement, we aim to develop our guidance to ensure it delivers an environment that can support the services that people and wildlife need. And I'll just hand over to Joel now for the next couple of slides.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Hi, everybody. I'm Joel. I work in the environment team at OFWAT. If you've been involved in the English WINEP review over the last couple of years, then we've likely met. And also just say thanks to Stantec for arranging the event today. It's nice to be here. This slide just shows a pretty simple timeline. We've cut out quite a lot of the detail that would come at the bottom half of it to just kind of focus in on both the English WINEP stages and how that kind of ties in with the various points in time for the PR24 submissions or kind of information releases from OFWAT itself. Ellie, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide. Thank you. So OFWAT is an economic regulator, strictly speaking. However, given water companies operate in the environment, we need to evolve what we mean by economics in a regulatory setting so that we internalise costs and benefits that previously been externalised. Now, that might be the impacts on biodiversity and carbon emissions for water company actions and investments, or the effects these might have on things like recreational opportunities and human health in our communities. That in turn will help to ensure that customers' money is being spent in the best way possible to deliver the environmental outcomes we all want to see in the water sector. So evolving what we mean by economic regulation will help us to identify and deliver the best value investments for customers and the environment. Now, putting that into practice, I draw your attention to pages 11 and 12 of the English WINEP options development guidance that Ellie mentioned before. And I want to pull out some of the important points from that information. Ellie covered the fact that there's a requirement in that English WINEP to contribute to the WINEP's wider environmental outcomes, which are the natural environment, net zero, catchment resilience, and access, amenity, and engagement. What's really important here is that companies robustly demonstrate how and when their investments will contribute to the WINEP's wider environmental outcomes and the associated natural capital improvements. In this context, robust means that measurements are not unduly open to bias or manipulation, that these kinds of influences can be effectively mitigated where they do exist. And also that these natural capital improvement expectations should be demonstrable. So that means the investment impact should be observable in a way that can be objectively recorded and reported on. And that's to give all parties confidence that customers will get value for their money, as well as providing clarity on how regulators can hold companies to account for delivering their plans. And in practice, this means we're prioritising the WINEP wider environmental outcomes that can be most robustly demonstrated, including over the long term. And I'll come back to this point towards the end of my talk in the context of the access, amenity, and engagement WINEP wider environmental outcome, which is significantly harder to robustly demonstrate compared to the other three. In the context of the natural capital approach in PR24, it's worth briefly reflecting on the English SPS and the Welsh SPS and some of the PR24 incentives that tie into that. Earlier this year, the English government published its strategic priorities for OFWAT. That has a clear emphasis on the environment, and amongst other things, OFWAT has been explicitly encouraged to focus on promoting ecosystem services, increasing the use of nature-based solutions, and to challenge water companies to meet water resource needs in a way that provides wider environmental and social improvements whilst representing the best value over the long term. Yesterday, the Welsh Government also laid their SPS for OFWAT before the Senedd, and that has a similar but distinct direction on some of these topics. Implicit to both of these SPSs is that we as a sector are going to have to continually improve our ability to understand the impact that we can have on the environment, both positively and negatively, and natural capital approaches will be central in that, although they're not a panacea. Aside from the WINEP, and as I just mentioned, we're also exploring the role that incentives can play in PR24 to deliver the right types of solutions. We published our PR24 draft methodology consultation this morning, and I'll quickly draw out 2 points from that, lest they be overshadowed by anything else that might be in a headline today. If you look at Appendix 9 on setting expenditure allowances, specifically Section 6.2, on facilitating the use of nature-based solutions, you'll see we've set out some options to encourage more nature-based solutions, including a proposal to set a 10-year allowance to be recovered over 2 price control periods for the efficient OPEX related to nature-based solutions, which are wholly or primarily OPEX based. I'd really encourage you to look at that and respond to it in your consultation responses. Second thing I'll draw out is we're proposing a performance commitment that measures the changes in biodiversity on company-owned land and third-party land on which companies are working in partnership as part of their statutory functions. Again, we'd really welcome your feedback on this part of the consultation, not least because it's a very tricky type of incentive to get right. And that brings me on to the final part of what I'll cover here, which is some of the challenges and issues around applying natural capital approaches in practice. The difficulty here is in applying natural capital metrics like Natural England's biodiversity metric, which we do in the WINEP and are proposing for this PR24 biodiversity PC. applying them in contexts that they weren't originally designed for. And that's not straightforward, but is the problem that's always been faced when applying environmental valuation in practice. Even with things like MWEBs that were specifically tailored for use in practice in the water sector, problems do arise. In addition to this, I said earlier I'd come back to the point about the access, amenity and engagement wider environmental outcome in the English WINEP being significantly harder to robustly demonstrate compared to the other three. Simply put, this is because it largely relies on stated preference techniques, and not only do these throw out some questionable values, but they're actually pretty impractical to evidence in reality. Put another way, it's pretty difficult and often impossible to demonstrate the associated value that's actually been delivered, which is necessary to hold companies to account. Now, we recognise that the WINEP wider environmental outcome is important to customers. For example, it includes benefits associated with recreation and education, which we all appreciate, and it will be considered as part of the WINEP options assessment process. However, the costs attached to delivering that outcome compared to the others like carbon reductions and biodiversity shouldn't be a material driver of the overall costs. Similarly, the associated benefits accounted for in the WINEP options development should be reasonably modest. I'll finish with a note on monitoring and reporting. The new English WINEP programme won't work perfectly, nothing ever does in policy, but what we are doing is forcing companies to monitor and report natural capital data on a considerable scale. Central to any efforts to improve the environment has to be the monitoring and reporting of changes that are actually happening on the ground, like we've proposed for the biodiversity PC. That data, in turn, provides regulators and companies with the confidence to support more innovative and non-traditional approaches to ultimately deliver better environmental outcomes. The issue here is that monitoring and reporting on long-term outcomes like biodiversity improvements is often extremely difficult to do robustly. This is even more so the case of social capital benefits like recreation and well-being associated with environmental investments. What's more, and as I mentioned earlier in the context of Natural England's biodiversity metric, until the discipline of natural capital assessments applied in regulatory settings specifically matures, will be inhibited by being forced to apply metrics in contexts that they weren't originally designed for. So there is an issue in terms of available metrics, but over and above the monitoring, reporting and transparency around this natural capital data should be the absolute focus of any work in this area. That's all for me. Thank you. Thanks to Stantec again. I think, Ellie, I'll hand back to you for the final slide on this pack.
Yep, that's right. Thank you very much, Joel. So we just wanted to finish with one final slide. So just a summary. So natural capital refers to the elements of nature that directly or indirectly produce value to people. A natural capital approach can be thought of as a framework for nature. And by working together to use a natural capital approach, we can deliver better outcomes for people and the wildlife. And just on the slide, signpost you, can probably pop this in the chat, maybe for those of you in the water industry who have access to SharePoint site, where the WINEP guidance, including all that information on the wider environmental outcome metrics that Joel has just covered, is available. So that's signposting to the recommended metrics and the other bits of evidence. The natural capital water industry engagement webinars that I talked about early on in my presentation are also held there, and also it's where you can find the WINEP methodology and the framework of guidance that falls from that methodology, including the options development guidance. And that's it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much both for your presentation. So if I could hand over to Nalika and Rebecca now, please, and away you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Good morning, all. Let me share my screen. Yeah, this presentation is about Utilities natural capital approach. Within next 15 minutes, me and my colleague share our AMP7 natural capital experience and how this will inform our PR24 development. Let's see a bit of background to our AMP7 approach. UU own 56,000 hectares of land across the Northwest, and we have a long history of addressing sustainability through different schemes such as SCAMP, catchment system thinking, or CAST, is our AMP7 approach. It encourages us to think the water environment holistically, allowing us to deliver multiple benefits to customers, communities, and the wider environment. This approach helps to deliver improvement to water quality, flooding, future development, population growth, resilience, and socio-economic impact. This approach allows to share investment, risk through collaboration and partnership, and to make more efficiencies in the process. In cost strategy, we utilize natural capital approach for decision making. Now, our AMP7 natural capital ODI and performance commitment. This is UU bespoke measure. It incentivizes us to use catchment system thinking to deliver water quality improvement through natural capital approach. This account the added natural capital value delivered for focusing on 6 ecosystem services valued by our customers, which is water quality, flooding, climate regulation, biodiversity, recreation and amenity, health and well-being. This is the value delivered over and above associated conventional engineering solution. Here is our AMP7 performance commitment summary. In the AMP7, in the year 1, our performance commitment is 0. In year 2, 1.7 million. Year 3 and 4, 0 again. And the year 5, 2.25 million performance commitment. And we have outer performance cap as well. 9 million in the year 1 and 5.75 in the year 2 and 4 in year 3 and 4 and year 5, 9 million. This graph explains it clearly. Bottom green line is performance commitment, and then the top red line is our reward cap. So if we do not deliver our performance commitment, we get penalty. If we deliver over and above our performance commitment, it gives us some reward. Now, our AMP7 scheme and natural capital valuation piece. Our AMP7 target is based on 21 WINEP schemes. New opportunities identified through monthly and annual review process throughout the company. Then added natural capital value is calculated using Syria-based tool, which quantify monetary value of the ecosystem services enhanced. This is the agreed methodology with the OFWAT. Qualified schemes are assured by an independent third-party assurer, which is Vivid Economists for us in the AMP7. So incentive rate is 50p per each £1 added natural capital value. In last year, we have successfully delivered 2 schemes, resulting 379k reward to the company. Third, to share a couple of successful case studies with you. Case study 1 is Southgate wastewater treatment work, wetland with public access. So our Southgate wastewater treatment site is a treat-all flow site. There was a requirement for storm storage, but conventional solution was very expensive and not practical. This Southgate scheme is a WINEP scheme. So we considered the possibility to have a wetland solution to treat storm spills. Number of design work undertaken. Horizontal media wetland was recognized to be the lowest cost. However, there was a opportunity to deliver a far greater natural capital benefit through a more natural type of wetland. So team wrote treatment marsh design with public access to maximize the natural capital benefit. Scheme was completed and open to public by 31st of March 2022. The added natural capital value from this scheme was 1.75 million. That is far greater compared to the horizontal flow wetland, which was initially considered. So this contributed our year 2 delivery. So this picture explain you this. The first picture is just once we open that for the public, but the second picture is after like 2 months. You can see how much plant grown for within 2 months. And our second case study is highest parameter SUD scheme. This was a partnership scheme between United Utilities and Cumbria County Council, and primary driver was reduced surface water flood risk. The design solution included a surface level SUD component with public open space. This design provided flood protection properties along with the wider natural capital benefit. This is not a WINEP scheme, so initially excluded from our natural capital ODI, but we developed a business case with external and internal support and agree with EA for the water quality contribution, and then confirm that with our third-party assurer that we can claim this through the natural capital ODI. So scheme completed by 31st of March 2022, and added natural capital value was 1.484 million. This was claimed through the year 2 delivery. So these both scheme provided a valuable experience for our future approach. Thank you very much. I'll let Becca to carry on with our lesson learned piece and the AMP8 approach.
Thank you, Nali. So there were a number of barriers identified in the delivery of nature-based solutions and natural capital in AMP7. The PR19 expectations were set too high and were not supported by robust optioneering and benefit assessments, and were set without developing a view of potential challenges to delivery. There were limited understanding of nature-based solutions and natural capital opportunities. High-level concepts were understood, but limited specific awareness across the business and stakeholders on what nature-based and natural capital solutions are, what benefits they deliver, and the long-term strategic significance. Without developing a detailed understanding, there will continue to be a lack of confidence in nature-based and natural capital solutions with operations, engineering, CDPs, and our regulators. There were regulatory barriers we encountered, for example, willingness for the EA and AMP7 in taking a truly catchment systems thinking approach, which has limited the consideration of nature-based and natural capital solutions. The tool we used to value natural capital best is limited in the natural capital benefits calculated. If there are no recreation benefits, how do we ensure we are robustly accounting for something like avoided carbon in a no-build solution? Nature-based and natural capital assets are not currently in the decision-making process for AMP7. When projects underwent the optioneering process for PR19 solution development, nature-based solutions and natural capital opportunities were never considered. Next slide now, please. Thank you. So as a result of having a natural capital performance commitment in AMP7, we have embedded an understanding of natural capital more broadly across the company. With the help of our internal e-learning tools and internal natural capital assessment tools, employees across the business are growing in confidence and expertise in this field. Through our internal risk assessment process, we have created a simplified tool for asset managers and engineers to produce an initial assessment of natural capital value of potential nature-based solutions. This allows the company to include these potential solutions when considering better value during the optioneering process. The image on the right shows the internal tool with an example of how natural capital can be valued. Next slide, please, Molly. So we do not have a bespoke natural capital ODI for AMP8 like we did in AMP7. One of the reasons for this is that natural capital and the condition of the environment should be considered throughout the whole programme for AMP8. Therefore, while developing the delivery programme for AMP8, we need to consider how each scheme identified will contribute to the wider environmental outcomes outlined by the EA. These are the natural environment, so left in a better state, net zero contribution, which is contributions to achieving a balance between the amount of greenhouse gases and emissions put into and the amount taken out of the atmosphere, catchment resilience, contributions to catchment floods and or drought resilience, access amenity and engagement, contributions to improving access to amenity sites and engagement to support customer and community wellbeing. These outcomes can be considered using a six capital approach and building on the foundations we have developed in AMP7 through the natural capital activities and incorporating other relevant capital themes in our business decisions. In the past, financial and manufactured capital were consistently embedded within business as usual activities. This AMP, we have considered natural capital in our decision making, and our future ambition is to continue to develop our natural capital approach and dive further into 6 capitals to incorporate in human capital, which is the value of the workforce, intellectual capital, industry knowledge and processes, and social capital, the relationships and the customer's trust, all within our business models. The future steps for PR24 business plan submission is to develop the AMP8 WINUP, which we're in the height of options development at the moment. To assist with this and assess the benefits, we're currently developing a value framework tool, which users input their project requirements and benefit value is produced as an output. We have developed important key partnerships in AMP7, and we aim to continue this engagement through to AMP8 and beyond. Our success in the petrol catchment, as mentioned by my colleague earlier, will provide us with a baseline for good practice, which we can now develop further and continue to improve, and further development of our natural capital accounts to inform business decisions, which I will talk about on the next slide. So we have had a corporate natural capital account since 2017, and we are updating this for this year. Through this account, we now have a baseline of the natural assets we own to plan against, a measure of how resilient they are, and a way to assess the impact of our investment on our natural assets. There's increasing interest for the water industry to move to a more nature positive business model. Keeping our corporate natural capital account up to date and relevant provides us with the ability to track our natural assets and highlight trends in increasing or decreasing quality, helping us plan for the future and improve our environmental resilience. But previously, we worked with FTech, a leading natural capital consultancy, to develop the first account, and this year we continue to work with them, but we will also build on it our internal capability, bringing the whole process completely in-house in the future. Our impact on natural capital goes far beyond our own assets. In order to understand this impact and to support the joint up delivery of resilience across the ecosystem, it was necessary to develop a Northwest natural capital baseline. This assesses the natural assets across the whole of the Northwest region, regardless of land ownership. We have the aspiration to maintain this engagement of the key stakeholders and to grow the usage of the report across the Northwest. This will help align planning and delivery to maximise the value of our region's natural capital. The Northwest baseline account will continue to be evolved through feedback and be regularly updated to track the condition of the region's natural capital and resilience of our ecosystem. To close, our AMP7 delivery programme and our natural capital performance commitment has provided some brilliant insight to natural capital, natural environment and risk and opportunity analysis. We are using the information and the lessons learned to influence our approach to AMP8 while exploring new approaches to decision making, with the goal to achieve the best business plan submission for the company and our customers. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Nalika and Rebecca. And I've had some experience myself actually during AMP7 of doing some natural capital approaches. And I think there have been some challenges, but I'm really excited about the way natural capital has been brought into the regulatory framework, and I think it enables local regulator teams as well as national regulator teams to approach this in a much more effective way. So I think the future looks exciting. And we now come to our last presentation by Bruce. So I will hand over to you now, Bruce, if I may. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Great presentations prior to me, so I'm hoping I can live up to that. I just want to cover 3 broad areas, and I'll cover the first 2 really quickly because they've been covered already. So what's natural capital? Let's look forward to AMP8 and why water companies need to kind of consider it more fully. And then, yeah, the main focus is really just, having a look at the WINEP guidance and some of our experience from doing this over the last few years. What can we learn, and what tips can we share with you? hopefully. So I'm not going to spend too long on explaining what natural capital is, because you know what it is, right? I think the key points for me, and it's come up in the chat already, the way I see it, it's become, actually, I understand the point about it being an asset that you could potentially exploit. I would look at it the other way around potentially, and by focusing on natural capital, it views the benefits that we get from natural capital, and it views those as an asset from which we derive benefits. And if you've got an asset that gives you benefits, not just your organisation or your local area, but a wider community and society, then why wouldn't you want to protect and enhance that asset? So I think it's a positive concept, and that helps to, and obviously natural capital underpins, as Ellie and Joel talked about, you know, wider society and the wider economy in which we all live and share. But it also helps by portraying the natural environment as a positive concept and as an asset to be protected and enhanced. I think it gets it to the attention of stakeholders, like, you know, particularly boards and finance directors and people like that we haven't engaged particularly well with in the past. So I think that's a positive thing for me about natural capital. I'm not too bothered about the terminology, but as long as we make better decisions as a result of considering natural capital, I think that's the key thing. Looking forward to AMP8, you know, I think in the past, natural capital has been seen as freely available. It's been seen as substitutable or someone else's responsibility. I think that is changing for the reasons that have been set out already. So consumers are demanding better understanding and better protection of the natural environment. I think the finance sector and the people that finance the water sector in particular are looking to not just climate change and climate risks and impacts, but also natural capital as well, and in making sure that we are you know, taking ownership and stewardship of the natural assets that we rely on. And that is underpinning a lot of the finances that flows through the sector increasingly. I think there's a policy driver as well. Obviously, we know about that. We'll see how that changes over the near and medium future. So I think it's not just because the regulator tells us to, although that's important, but there are loads of other reasons why we want to put a greater focus on natural capital. I think what I'd add to that list as well is kind of staff and stakeholders. You know, we know that the organisations that we all work in, people do actually care about this stuff and they want to do their bit, and other stakeholders that we work with as well. So I think it's really important from lots of different perspectives to embed it into our decision making. And I won't go through this one. You know, I think Ellie and Joel covered this particularly well. You know, if you want more information on why natural capital is important and what the benefits are of taking a natural capital approach, there are resources out there, including the Capitals Coalition, that have done a really good job in making that case. So what I want to come on to is a few tips and examples, having reviewed and looked at the WINEP guidance and worked on this for the last few years. I think there's a few kind of major things, and I'll come on to some of these in a little bit more detail. But the WINEP guidance, as the agency and OFWAT have already spoken about, it kind of proposes the catchment first approach. Not sure I'm a bit worried about the terminology of catchment first, but I think it's on the whole, you know, let's look at the catchment first and whether we can look at natural assets first rather than physical and manufactured assets. So I think, you know, alongside that, if we're trying to embed good practice here, I think one of the things I'll come back to for water companies particularly is we all have a project gateway approach. So we can embed natural capital at different gateways within option development and option assessment, and even before that as well. So I think I'll come back to that in a sec. Involve lots of different stakeholders. Ellie touched on that already. So it's important to talk to different people, because we know that multiple benefits that we get from natural capital approaches accrue to different sectors, and not just to the organisation in which we might work or have an interest, but also to a range of other organisations and people in the societies that we serve as well. So it's important to engage with those stakeholders at an early stage. Obviously, the WINEP guidance requires consideration of natural capital and options appraisal. There are some standard approaches for doing that, and I think I'll come back to that as well. One of the other things as well is about looking at more than one feasible option. So not just having one option in your head as a preferred option from the outset, but it's important to kind of being able to compare different options. Obviously, the wider environmental outcomes, I'll come back to that too, and focusing on those that are most material. So there are lots of wider environmental outcomes and societal outcomes we could consider, but I think it's important to focus on those that are likely to have the biggest impact. Use the best available information we can, but potentially look at other capitals. I think you have obviously been doing that, and their presentation was great in terms of looking at a 6 capitals approach. I think all companies will be or are moving towards that kind of broader approach, so not just natural capital. Actually, we should be thinking about social and other capitals at the same time. Monetize impacts where possible, and there are loads of different sources and tools. I'll put up a few of them. You will be familiar with lots of them, I'm sure. And being transparent, recording the approach, method, results that you've taken and that you report. And I think just making sure that we can be consistent in the way that we assess different schemes and programs, but also making sure that it's open to scrutiny. So if people want to see what we've done in taking a natural capital approach and want to try and improve, and if we want to improve those approaches over time, then we can do that. But it's important to have a record of what we've done and how we've done it. So I'll just come to a few of those in slightly more detail. First one follows standard approach, so it's not terribly complicated following taking a natural capital approach. I think there's a couple of or a few key things that we need to do. One is kind of understand the baseline, so understand where we are at the moment. So it's important to look at the area that we are working in, the area that we potentially are going to impact upon, what habitats are there at the moment, what ecosystem services do those habitats provide, and what is the state and condition and quantity of those assets, if we can, to try and describe and quantify those. So it's important to have an understanding of where we're starting from, because if we don't know where we're starting from, we're going to struggle to articulate where we've got to. So I think it's, as Ellie mentioned again, it's that change that we're interested in. Use logic change. I think again, Ellie showed one from the WINEP guidance, but basically we want to move from understanding and being able to articulate what the characteristics of the site is, what's the baseline, what assets do we have already, what ecosystem services does that provide, those assets provide, and then what benefits do we accrue from those ecosystem services. And obviously that's the benefit is kind of where the economics bit comes in, and being able to assess, measure and potentially value those benefits. But that's the kind of last piece of the jigsaw almost. Before that, we need to understand that the first bits of that logic chain, I think. Then it's about mapping opportunities to enhance natural capital. So what can we do? Where can we intervene to try and make improvements? And then trying to quantify and monetize the benefits we get from those enhancements. And obviously the benefits is just one side of the equation. There could be disbenefits or costs associated with interventions, and we need to make sure those are captured too. So it's a pretty standard approach, not terribly complicated, and I think we need to try and keep it simple where we possibly can. Second thing, assess more than one feasible option. So obviously the WINEP guidance asks you to consider at least a preferred option and a least cost option. Those might be different. It's not always possible. For example, if there's a statutory requirement or there's a very prescriptive outcome that is being required, then there may only be one option, but generally there will be more than one way to deliver the outcome that we're interested in. So it's important so that we can make a good case and undertake that options assessment work to be able to compare different options, and they should be reasonably different as well. So generally we're looking at kind of engineered, green, hybrid type approaches so that we can compare and contrast between those. I mentioned WINEP requires you to take a kind of catchment first approach as well. Engaging stakeholders, not just around what the options should be and developing the options, but also what evidence can we use, what are the risks and issues, and so on. And then there's some, quite normal prescriptive stuff within the WINEP guidance around taking a 30-year time horizon, for example, discounting future costs and benefits at the appropriate discount rate, etc. So it's important to follow those aspects too. Use appropriate metrics. So obviously you'll all be familiar with the WINEP wider environmental outcomes. I think previous speakers have all touched on those. What I would say is that it's pretty comprehensive, obviously, and there's a lot of consistency with the kind of ecosystem service categories that were set out years ago by, I think it was the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. So we're fairly familiar with these different categories by now. I think we shouldn't probably tie ourselves just to these categories, though. There may be instances where we want to look more widely than the WINEP outcomes. So, for example, flood risk reduction for other habitat types, and we might want to look at a wider socio-economic outcomes as well. So contribution to the local economy, health outcomes, the impacts on people within that area that we're interested in, for example. So I think let's focus on natural capital, but let's also consider some of the wider potential outcomes that we might be important too. I mentioned about project gateways. All water companies kind of tend to follow the same basic structure around different gateways where you identify potential need and potential schemes to deliver that need. So I think it's important not just to consider natural capital in the kind of options development and options assessment bits, which are broadly kind of gateways 1 and 2. They're called they have different numbers and different names in different water companies. But right at the outset, can we consider, even when we're identifying the need to achieve an outcome, can we consider natural capital assets and impacts alongside our more traditional assets? And then at the optioneering stage, option selection, as we kind of filter down and screen down to feasible options, and then right through to delivery as well, and monitoring and evaluation. So I think we need to consider natural capital at all of those different gateways, not just 1 or 2 of them. Utilize available evidence and tools. So you'll be familiar with loads of these, I'm sure. And what I would say is there's quite a lot of consistency now amongst these tools. They can be used for different purposes, and they have slightly different contexts and emphases. But broadly, they're all trying to do quite similar things. And I think there's probably a case now for trying to consolidate some of these tools so that we have a bit more consistency. And we've seen from UU, and I'm sure other water companies are doing it too, that they're trying to develop kind of bespoke tools that try and simplify some of this wider available evidence so that it's appropriate to that water company. But there's lots of different tools and resources out there available to support you. I've been involved in developing BEST over the last few years, and that's going to be updated in the next few months and new version released. But broadly, as I mentioned, they all have, there's a lot of consistency across these. What I would say though is that, and I think Ellie touched on this, it's quite an important point, is that values vary. So if we're trying to monetize some of the benefits and values that we get from natural capital and ecosystem services, the values do vary. So whilst we all want simplicity and consistency, the value of a recreational visit is not always £2.34 or whatever it is, right? It will vary because of location, context, what green space and other recreational facilities is there at the moment, what the status of that green space or recreational area is, the quality of it. So values do vary, and it's important not to kind of, just say, give me the monetary value for this ecosystem service or this piece of natural capital, because you will generally get the wrong answer. So I think we need to try and capture some of that range and uncertainty when we're applying evidence and tools. Couple of examples. Those are the main kind of tips I wanted to share with you. Hopefully that's been useful. A couple of examples, I think, this is from a strategic resource option project, but again, doing that baseline mapping is really important because it enables you to focus on where those benefits are coming from and where the opportunities to enhance benefits might arise. And fairly simple on the right hand side there, a fairly simple screening approach enables you to then focus in particular on those benefits or that are most likely to be significant, and you can focus the analysis on those options. I think the other thing I'll say briefly is that you can do natural capital approaches at different levels. So we've done work for the Environment Agency on natural capital of groundwater, and that was a national scale approach. So broadly, obviously there's kind of more uncertainty when you take a national approach, but broadly, you can take the approach is very similar, and the tools and evidence that you use is quite similar as well. And that enables you to give a fairly broad brush picture of the natural capital at a big geographical and the benefits that you derive at a large geographical scale. But you can also do it at a very local or program or scheme level as well. And you I think, had a very similar example of a kind of constructed wetland. So we can look at what are the alternative options to deliver the outcome that we're interested in this case, kind of phosphorus reduction, and comparing those options in terms of the financial cost, but also the natural capital benefits, and in this case, some of the carbon savings you might get too. So I think by comparing, and actually in this case, the green solution, if you like, was cheaper, so financially less expensive. So in that case, if it's cheaper, why wouldn't you do it anyway, right? I think the natural capital is kind of add-on in that case by demonstrating that not only is it cheaper, but you also deliver these range of co-benefits. So I'll stop there. I'll leave you with a quote just to try and inspire you for the rest of the webinar and to try and come up with some questions. I'm sure you will already, and I'll hand back to you, Chris.
Thank you. So thank you to everyone who's put questions in the chat. I'm not sure we'll have time to get through them all, but let's see how we go. So first question, it's for Ellie and Joel, although I will ask if Ellie and Joel pick it up. Then if the other speakers want to weigh in, I'm quite happy with that. But we've only got 7 or 8 minutes, so try to keep the answers succinct, please. So it's a question from Rosanna Griffiths. What are the key learning points to date with natural capital? And then the second part to that is, what are the key areas for improvement and opportunity going forward? Nice, easy one to start with.
I'm quite happy to take that one, and Ellie,
Yeah.
just jump in or jump in at the end. I don't think. I think on key learnings, it's quite difficult to say much of interest at this point in the context of the English winner. There is going to be a formal evaluation. I think at that point that would inform, the learnings from it. In the meantime, I think for me the key learnings is that it's really difficult to get the stuff kind of absolutely right. In fact, I'm not sure that's a possible destination in itself, in part because so much of this is a kind of chicken and egg situation in terms of applying natural capital approaches in practice. On the one hand, we know that the available approaches and metrics are pretty young compared to where they'll be in the decades ahead. On the other hand, probably the best way of improving our understanding of what the best approaches and metrics might be is to try it and evolve that approach over time. In terms of improvement going forwards, and as part of the English WINEP review, the EA, OFWAT and DEFRA jointly published the WINEP roadmap earlier this year. That's on gov.uk. There's in that is action 4, which I think is relevant here. It sets out a commitment for future WINEPs to increase the use of catchment and nature-based solutions, recognising that a natural capital approach will become further integrated into water company decision making. Exactly how we do that is to be explored, but certainly this is an area we're jointly looking at to evolve and improve in future, both in terms of the metrics that might be used, but also how we apply them in practice across WINEP options development, but also across cost assessments to ensure the best value plans and investments are realised.
Okay, Nalika and Rebecca, hopefully a quick one for you actually. Is the natural capital steering tool that you referred to, is that freely available? That's from Ruth Jones.
So it's not freely available at the moment. It's built on the basis of our internal risk and opportunity assessment tool that we have. And this is a bolt-on, and it's a solution type that we can put into our system. I'm sure that we can put a flow of information together and share that flow of information, but the actual tool itself is embedded into our corporate system.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's Nalika and Rebecca again. A question from Dave Garner. How can nature-based solutions be used for co-benefit for the EA, taking into account things like nutrient neutrality, biodiversity net gain, carbon challenges, etc.?
Yeah, we have done, like, recently the maturity of nature-based solution within the company. So we have gathered all the experience we have with the wetland development and all sort of stuff. And then we are planning to expand this to farm level in terms of nutrient neutrality, how we can develop these things in the partnership, in the catchment, not only in treatment work. So we have look and yeah, planning to adapt in the future in wider catchment system thinking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think we've got time for one more. I'll put this to the whole panel really, because I guess it's quite pejorative. But so under PR24 and WINEP, I think everyone's really pleased with the direction of travel, but there are some sort of natural tensions there. So we've got things like nutrient neutrality, perhaps the Environment Act targets for phosphorus. When you put all those in the mix, there is a tendency to drive some of these solutions to sort of hard engineering treatment, because you can't get the, you can't get those, say, phosphorus reductions through nature-based solutions or catchment solutions alone. So on the one hand, it's great that we're reducing the phosphorus, but on the other hand, you're going to put in carbon intensive treatment processes. How do you think we can handle that going forward from a regulatory perspective, balancing those tensions?
I can have a go answering that, Chris. Well, I'll start. So you mentioned the Environment Act driver.
Yeah.
So that doesn't preclude doing catchment-based solutions. You're still able to do a catchment-based solution at the wastewater treatment works site. So you can still do an integrated constructed wetland. You can still use biological reduction. You don't have to necessarily jump to the old grey infrastructure and chemical dosing. So it's really trying to, I think in my head, it's trying to do as much as we can within the constraints that we're set within this time round. It's like an evolution, isn't it? I sort of think, we've moved from PR19, we're trying to do the right thing in PR24, we're learning, we're developing it all the time. There's more development we can do around the metrics. So I think it's just a gradual process of moving in the right direction, which I think we should all be embracing.
Okay, and I think I think that's a really good answer actually, and I think it's probably something your last few words there that we all should be embracing. I think it's that collaborative thing that everybody's trying to get to the same place, and it's not meant to be adversarial and all that stuff. So no, that's terrific. We've got to wrap up there, so I will thank the speakers once more. I thought you all did a terrific job. Timing was great. Bruce, well done once again for your phone your phone presentation. Catherine has just asked for some feedback on a poll question. If you could accommodate that, that would be terrific. You will all be receiving an email with a link to the recording. So please follow that, and also please see the chat if you want to keep up with future webinars that we'll be running. So as I say, once again, thank you to the speakers and thank you to you all for attending. Thank you everybody who's attended once more. All right, thank you everyone.